not humorous. It wasn't humor. But it was severe, it was stern, and he is he is a judge with distinct, with integrity. He's a great judge.
Was he playing
No.
character?
No, but he's very dramatic.
Oh, he is.
Theater is drama. If any of you are teachers and you deal with drama, the court itself, if you talk to any lawyer, a court itself is just orchestrated drama with a lot of anxiety and intensity, but orchestrated drama. And I just sat in the back taking pictures, and he was not really happy that I was taking pictures, but this is it. So,
But he's out of his...
he came down to talk to the students. Oh, because he's a nice guy.
Yeah, but at least he made the distance less.
Well, because then he could hit you with the bat. But that's punitive. That's the sword that justice carries to enforce. That's punitive, and there's nothing wrong. That's our system. We have law, we have equity. You never want to argue a case in equity because that's fairness, and that's like a loser's argument. Law is the one that has the penalties, the recovery, it has the teeth, it has the bat, it has the sword, it has the robes, it has authority. But this is not Korchakian, and this is not a youth court. This is the contrast. This is how every distinction you make, and throughout the year and throughout everything, I give the kids, this is your distinction. You have to have a line of contrast to show what you are. You don't define yourself by what you're not, but you need a starting point. That ain't it. And again, afterwards, let me give you a little, you take a group on a field trip. Anybody understand, anybody get the little game here? What does this mean? Famous attributed quote to Napoleon that when you take kids anywhere in their middle school, you feed them because an army marches on its belly. So, and we took them to a buffet place, and they proceeded to do not the 7-year, the 8th grade locust on the buffet. But it was great. And it was wonderful. And this year, I'm more to that thing that I'll be able to do this again. So here, another distinction. I try to keep it literary as well. If any of you are high school or middle school language arts teachers, O. Henry is often in the curriculum, and the story A Retrieved Reformation is about the beginning of the story. I put a copy of the story in your materials, and I put in a restorative versus punitive activity that I use with it. After this, the story is a person is set up before a judge, before the warden in the prison, and the warden says basically, hey, I'm getting you out. You're lucky to get out, but you're so bad I know you're going to do it again. And the guy says, warden, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do it in the first place. And then the whole story, then all of a sudden he goes out, and then magically all these safes are cracked, and there's a crime spree for about a year. Then he goes to a new place, and he falls in love. Love changes him, falls in love. He opens up a shoe store. Instead of robbing the place, he falls in love with the bank manager's, the bank owner's daughter, and becomes a respectable man. And he's about ready to give up his safe cracking tools because he's marrying the girl. Totally changed his life. And in the background, there's a detective that's following his trails. And he is about ready to give it up. Instead of, he has a luggage container full of all his best safe cracking materials. He's taking them to the train, and then they find out that the new safe that the bank put in, unfortunately, his 2 nieces were locked in it. And it wouldn't open until, a couple of days, and there was no air. Nothing could be done. So what does he do? What could he do? He could crack the safe, but what was he risk? What? Yeah, because he's showing that he's not Ralph Spencer shoe salesman. He's showing that he's actually a very skilled safecracker. So what he does is he just opens up the bag, walks over, says, excuse me, cracks the safe, looks up, sees the detective looking through the rails. The detective looks at him. And the guy says, you finally caught me. Yeah, well, okay, guess that's it. And the detective, in the story at the end, what do you think the detective says? Punitive justice. What does a detective do? Why? He broke a lot of rules, right? You arrest him. Restorative. I don't know. It's not so easy. I have the kids deal with that. But, in the story, what happens is the detective, what do you think the detective does? The detective is really annoyed. Yes, ma'am?
I'm just guessing, like maybe the detective just walk away because he just did what he had to do.
Good guess. The detective, although, what does a detective have to do? The detective can't sit there under punitive justice, right? The detective can't pick and choose the rules that he follows. That's for a jury, right? That's a determination that's done by somebody. He has his authority. And yet in the story, the super detective says, I don't believe we've ever met, sir. And he walks out. It's a wonderful story, but you can do all sorts of things based on what I do originally is I do, as a language arts teacher, you do conflict, person versus person, person versus self, person versus society, and you go through the whole thing, and that satisfies your standards. But in terms of a youth court, this is a great opportunity to explore the distinctions between restorative and punitive justice, because everybody has a job they have to do. You're accountable, but the detective is accountable. So that's again another interesting one. Everybody makes mistakes. It's a good idea to give someone a second chance. Isn't that the greatest lesson for school? You're not a rule, you're not a stigma. You're not a rule breaker. You're forgiven. You got another chance. You got make it better. He did make it better. There was actually a case, I was trying to find it within the last couple of weeks, where somebody did something heroic, and I can't find it in the news yet, and he had an outstanding warrant that the DA, if anybody remembers that, you can bring that up, because I'll find that when I go home. I just can't access the computer, but that came up, and it actually was dismissed. You remember, he did not, the person chose to not bring charges against him.
No, I was just not.
Yeah, and it's wonderful, because then again, every time you show something that's a real world thing, that's where a defender, somebody will make a decision, either the defender or the prosecutor. So, next, this I think is great. I love these activities where I can build something. I gave them to you. They're three-part. It's called the button list, de-escalation, and obstacles and challenges. First, I have kids that break them up into a group, and I have them brainstorm and write down the things that push their buttons. I tell you, you write anything. What really blanks you off in school? What blanks you off? What really pushes your buttons? And then they write them all out, and in the middle there, I think there's a square, rank your top three. But fill the sides, rank your top three. Next, when they're done with that, I give them a long time to do that, then I have them de-escalate. What do you do? How could you deal with this? How can you de-escalate? How can you lower the volume? How can you lower the intensity on this? And let them sit there and write. And I've done this for a few years. And I keep all this stuff. I actually have them in the suitcase. I have all the responses because I want reality. I need to know reality because I can't manufacture reality. That's coming from me. Then, and you will be surprised. If you just do buttons and de-escalation, you're going to find my kids know everything. They know how to de-escalate. They know all the answers. They know the right things to say. They know the right stuff, and they give you the answers you want to see. You say, wow, these kids know it. Boom, give them the third one. What are the obstacles and challenges to your ideas and solutions? Then you're going to get the real world. Well, I can't do that because the teacher, number one, I'm going to have to sit with this person anyway. Number two, I'm in 3 classes with this person. Number 5, it never works that way. Number 6, my reputation is going to be done. I'm not going to tell on somebody. They'll go through a whole list of things that are better, and these are the obstacles, because what this is what's going to work against you having a successful resolution of harm or reparation of harm. Because if you don't deal with the obstacles, you'll never repair the harm because you won't build the skills and the mechanisms to stop it from recurring. Because if you ignore this, you've ignored a key aspect of it. You can't rush developing a court. Then we go through the children. This is important again, go back to Korchak. A child knows his environment. She can sense kindness. She detects deceit. She's able to read a face in the same way a farmer reads the sky to forecast the weather. This is because she, too, has been observing and investigating things for many years. They see all, they watch all. Now, of course, it's filtered through their experience. That's why I have a lot of kids. These are the problems with kids and what they observe and what they respond. And I was talking about this with my wife yesterday. Ask a kid, what'd you do in school today? Nothing. What'd you learn today in school? What do they say? Nothing. You know they've had all sorts of stuff. There are reasons why they say nothing. That nothing is coded with layers of, well, I learned that I'm still considered useless. I learned that Mr. Smith is really a jerk and is unfair. I learned that, I might like Gene. I learned that whatever. And I'm not going to talk to you about it. There's all sorts of things that's in that head. Everything is in that head. Can I just ask what's on the list? Can I just say nothing? That's the reality. So how do you teach a kid to question? Because if you don't teach a kid to question and question the person in front of them or a group to question, you're going to be patting yourself on the back that you have a great youth court, but you're not going to solve anything because kids are just reading a list. I go back to, again, literature, Rudyard Kipling, From the Elephant's Child, a really good short story. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and where and how and why and who. Those are your standard, what they call the journalist questions. And again, to keep it root-based in literature, go back to Kipling. And it goes back to Greek, but it also, this is current for us. And then as you go into the questioning, remember again, the court is not truth. That's another one from Korchak, but its goal is truth. It's not truth, but you go for it. You aim high because you're going to miss a little better if you don't aim low. So what do I do with questioning? I bring in, for this group, I brought in a local attorney. This woman works with the superior courts, and she came in and she worked with helping kids to ask good, incisive questions. It's a wonderful thing. But you want to be careful. Never surrender your role as a teacher to a presenter. Because unless you know what they're going to present, because maybe the kids have seen it before, and if they've seen something before, here's the response. Oh, yeah, all right, whatever. So you don't want that because this is the key moment. And what she showed was a video the kids had seen before. And that was a problem. It was, if you've not seen it, it's you give the kids a puzzle. You give them a basketball, and you say, okay, there's so many kids, and they're going to pass the ball around. How many of you have seen this one? Raise your hand if you've seen it. Count how many times the kids pass the basketball. Right? And they're all going to count. And then at the end, somebody will raise their hand. They say, how many of you saw the gorilla leave the room? And it just shows they focus on one thing and whatever. But it's great. It's a fantastic thing, but it loses all its appeal when you have, little Steve in the back who goes, yeah, there's a gorilla. So be careful. You don't want a gotcha moment in class. You don't want gotcha moments. You want real questions. You want things that really you can go to. No gimmicks. She was great, though. Really, really good. But again, be careful. What kind of questions you want to do? How do you want to show them? And think, would this make me ask other questions? Another thing I did, and it's in your materials, I created these scenarios that were built on kids' responses. I gave you 2 scenarios. And in law school, we used to do simulations where we would negotiate. You get a packet. Stuff you know, stuff you don't know is given to somebody else, and you negotiate, and you try and come to something. Right? So what I did was in the packet, you have the full materials. It'll have what's known about the kid and what's the private life. And what I did was I had older students really get familiar with the detail. And then I broke the kids up into groups, and they questioned that student. They went through the series of questionings about what the student did wrong, and they went through the questions that you'll have. So what do you think I was looking for there? Now, bear in mind, with the Middle School Confidential, the only one who read that was the person who played the role of the person who did something wrong. So you would be in a group. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. You're in a group. I stand before you. I did something wrong. You're going to start asking me questions. You're going to go through your list. You'll know what is the first case scenario. What does it say?
Disrespect to student.
Could you read it? Just in the box.
Student mouths off to a language arts teacher when teacher is collecting homework, swears under breath, gets defiant, and charges out of room. Classroom.
Yeah. Kid. So you're going to ask these questions, right? People will ask the questions, and the student will come in. I had a student play the role. I had maybe 2 students do it, and I had different groups. And then at the end, we got around and we asked this to the person who was like me, if you asked me the questions. They would respond, but I would write what shut you down, what opened you up, what needed work, and when the kids come up with a solution, what did you think about it? Did you feel valued, or were you heard? Of all the things I've given you, or I'm going to give you or talk about, this is this and the button, push a button, this is so essential because you find out something real. Guess what I found out? What are some things you think that the person would say about his peers or her peers questioning her? What do you think would be the what shut you down, what opened you up, what needed work? Yeah, excellent. That's it's like basically right out of the manual would say close and, but something more. What a middle school kid would say.
You asked me how I saw it versus assumed how it went.
Okay, well you're really being intellectual about this. I mean, these are kids that are ruled by they're ruled by hormones, So they're gonna respond. Let me give you, at the risk of time, number one that showed up on almost all the kids that played the role was tone. They did not like the tone of the questioner. Number two, this showed up on all. These are important because my wife's a social psychologist. She takes data, whatever. I assemble as much data as I can. This is the best I can do. I have a lab. Like Korchak had his orphanage's lab. This is my lab. Eye contact. You don't look at my eyes, you're disrespecting me. Tone, eye contact. Those are 2 things you can teach a kid anyway. Now, culturally, some people will not lock eyes with you. But in terms of, you got to understand where it's coming from. But in that case, tone, eye contact. Another one, the person it seemed like they didn't listen to the opening statement, what was presented about the case. They weren't listening. Didn't listen. Eye contact, tone, didn't listen. In the manuals that I deal with, and I'm consistently trying to understand what I can do and what I can't do, and asking advice, people say, yes, you can ask personal questions. Because this is done, it's purely confidential. And there are other distinctions with Korchak. This is purely confidential. You can't ask personal questions. One of the other ones that came up with it was somebody laughed when he asked some questions about my family. Now, you're in a small school, people know about families. So, look, you got to do it. But I'm telling you, those are reality. They come up. If kids say it, and over time, that's your responsibility. You've got to find what's real, because you're just going to come up with, you're going to do stuff that pats you on the back and you think, wow, I'm great. But if it's not real, it's not going to do anything. Authentic, you can fix tone, eye contact. You can fix, whether they take it or whether they listen. So.
Sorry, do they bring up body language?
They said, again, I view that almost with looking down, body language. Yeah, they say, and it's more visceral. It's like, I didn't like the tone. He didn't look at me. He was smiling when he asked about my family. I said that 5 times already. Because then they're not listening. And you'll see as we go through it, what they actually, what they do. So those are clear. And look, if you're teaching a kid to have eye contact, proper tone, listen, you're giving them skills that they're going to need anyway. This is, again, tomorrow I talk about the postcards, because there's a hybrid thing that I do in my court, which is, again, connection to Korchak, which is one of the reasons why I did, because it wasn't just the court. He did, when I went to the museum, the Ghetto Fighter's house, I bought they had a selection of facsimile of postcards. And it said in the facsimile, and the video accompanying the facsimile, the DVD, that he gave cards as encouragement. to kids when they did something. Now, I understand full well that he had a system and that they were also distributed in the court as well. And they had a certain allocation and there were certain symbolic distributions. But originally, you know, you look at this and you say, wow, what a great concept. Give a kid a token. And that's what Korczak said as well. You know, these are tokens. Some kids, or souvenirs, they might remember them, you know, they might matter, they might forget them on life's journey. But, you know, he would give them. And so that's something that we do, and I make every session of the court that I tried to establish is always giving of cards first, and it's announced. And another thing with the name of Korczak, I transliterate Korczak. I put it K-O-R-C-H-U-K, and I separate it so the kids, you know, they'll go Korczak, and they read it, so they'll you know, but they're just mouthing, and they understand this is a legacy. It's something they're doing is not just, hey, this is, you know, this is something. This has a history, and its history is connected to powerless children at a time when children were vulnerable and in threat and suffered. And this gave them a voice. And, you know, that's your job as a teacher, responsibility and legacy. And you're responsible to the legacy. So we have there's a bigger video of the actual court that I have them do where they swear in. There's a form, and I gave you a script. You could actually build a court based on it. It has the players, it has the participants, but I'm trying to give you the reason and why it matters. This is this is something, again, from Korczak. Again, whenever I think why it matters, I go back to Korczak. Youth advocate questioning. This is the person who and this is connected to the person who stands with the person who did something wrong to present their case. This is what Korczak said. A teacher who, instead of forcing, emancipate, who does not pull but raises up, does not oppress but molds, does not dictate but instructs, does not demand but asks, is destined to live through many inspired moments together with the child, and will frequently be able to observe, through a veil of tears, the struggle between good and evil forces, and to watch the white angel walk off with the trump card. Wow. But substitute teacher with peers. And that's what you're doing. Because at every proceeding that we've done, I've been at them, and I would love to have said a million things like, why not ask that, why not ask that, but I don't, because it's not my proceeding. It's not my game. It's not my show. Now, this is something important that I do want to make sure that I get to read it. This was one of my students who years ago was an advocate in a simulation. And she's actually helped this year in the actual running of the court. And I asked her for feedback when she was questioning respondent, and this is what she said. When I was questioning the respondent, there were a few things I had to keep in mind. This person isn't a bad person. I don't know what is happening in his or her life right now. I have to make the person comfortable in a tough situation. A struggle for me was making the person feel comfortable with answering the questions, but once I started to get the hang of it, it was easier to follow up her questions with relations to my life to help her understand that we've all been there. That's an 8th grade girl. That's an 8th grade girl. You know, and there's something else towards the end of the materials, you know, you can see where she reflected and she makes some other comments on this. These are the jury deliberations. Again, going back to Korczak, the people that not only question the person who did something wrong, these are the person that come up with what the template for fixing it, what we call a disposition. You're the delegates. He said, until now, I was all alone. I wanted to make life good for everyone. But it's very hard for one person to know what everybody needs. It'll be easier for you. Some of you know what the cities need. Some of you know what the countryside needs. The little children know what the little children need. And the big children know what the big children need. I hope that someday children from all over the world will meet together the way the kings did recently. And all the children will present their own special needs. You know, you have a whole group of people who are familiar. Use the resources the kids have. You know, that's important. Again, I had other deliberations, and this is what I called it, the Sharpsville Korczak Youth Court. Now, again, the goals of when they come up with a decision, and not a decision, because again, bless you, the kids you don't determine guilt or innocence. In order to be in you did it. The court does not determine. That's a difference, again, between perhaps Korchak's court of peers and this. There's no question of guilt or innocence. You did it. The whole reason is, why did you do it? How can it become, how can we not do it again? Who did you hurt? Fix it. So some of the things that we came up with that were really important, and this was through practice, is obviously use the resources in your school as parts of the disposition. You come up with things like, we have some things in our school currently. Some of you mentioned big and little. Our principal established a house system in our school based on sort of like Harry Potter, where there were 4 historical houses from people in our small community, and kids were grouped into and selected like the hat into each of these 4 houses. And they have a big, they have a little, they have a family, and that's a way of her including everybody. And anybody interested in that, she would be more than happy to share it. It's remarkable. It's our 3rd year of doing it, and it's powerful, but we have to seed it. It has to work. So part of every disposition, we have to make sure that the kid knows who his family members are. Is he a big, little, and this is taking more root. Another one, we have kids that we require them to make goal sheets at the beginning. All schools do that, whatever, make their goals. As part of every disposition, we have them take one goal that they wrote down and show 2 weeks progress on it. They don't have to solve it, they don't have to fulfill it, just some progress. Then we also have them figure out, is there a teacher? Part of the questioning involves, is there a teacher you have a good association with? Do you have a good relationship with it? And somebody said that that the kids don't feel like there's anybody. We try to have, my principal again also established this thing where at the beginning of the year and we revisit it, we want to make sure that every kid has at least one adult advocate. We ask them to write, who would you bring an adult? Who would you trust to? Which teacher? It could be staff, it could be custodial, it could be lunchroom, it could be teacher. That is remarkable. That is, you will find the kids who don't have an adult, they don't mark one, those are the kids who need one. And, you keep it confidential, but you better get and find an advocate for that kid. I used that list to help myself. I really did. I used it in a court with one kid who mentioned that he trusted me, and he was actually our first case. And he mentioned that I was his advocate, or that he would trust me because I like to make art. I like to do art, and this kid, he was in there because he did dirty pictures. And use your talent for good. But anyway, I used that, and it was a wonderful thing because that was information that was part of what our school already, again, it was within our x-ray, it was our growth. It was initiative that I'm not clashing with the school initiative. I'm enhancing or using what people have already determined was important. Student-directed goals, an advocate, our house system. My principal also has yoga meditation for a thing. There are all sorts of things that we have, and we try and incorporate things, and I think those are the best. You can't, the problem is, here's the problem again in practice. You end up writing the disposition. If you put in must have, then you've written it. The kids don't do it. So you focus on what's clear. Number one, if they're obviously, as an adult, you notice that there's a guidance issue, a family issue, you have to include guidance. Just tick it off. Number two, you have to have them revisit a goal. Beyond that point, everything else is probably available to you. Revisit a goal. Let them self-reflect. I think another important thing is the apology. You'll find the kids. That's another thing. You think it's important. Did they apologize? Did they? If your court system is late and doesn't work, time has passed. But sometimes kids can't do a written apology. They'll do a verbal. Don't assign essays. That's the biggest mistake. People say, write an essay about this, research this. Use the initiatives in your school. Incorporate other teachers and say, what are you trying to do? What do you like? Can a teacher be shadowed? Can you do something? You enhance it. That's when I say that this can change the culture and climate of your school. This can change the culture and climate of your school because you're respecting decisions other people have made. This has been very helpful for me. Number one, the reason why I'm here today is because of the man on the right, on your right. He does a one-act, one-person play about Korchak. He takes on the persona of Korchak, takes 10 matchboxes, and he does a wonderful play. My wife had us see this maybe 3 years ago in Pittsburgh, and afterwards, I talked to the performer, and I said, he had made the comment that he actually does a youth court. And there you see in the circle, for some reason, he just pulled me up and said, you sit in the court. And I thought it was funny. And I said, at the end of the performance, I said, yeah, put me in the court. We actually do have a court. And he had said, I've just done this performance. I believe he said in front of a surviving orphan from the orphanage in Canada. And I said, well, I would like you to tell him that a school in Sharpsville, Pennsylvania, without any Jews in it, without anybody who knows really anything about it, is basically does the lessons, learns the legacy, and respects the legacy of Korchak almost every day. And I think after that, when he traveled around, I ended up getting a call from Tatiana to say, and that was last summer. And then I went to a conference here last summer, and it was wonderful. Jerry Nussbaum, I met all these people, and I saw your production. It was wonderful, and that's how. So this is an important, I think this is about as Korchakian as it gets. You don't stop playing because you grow old. You grow old when you stop playing.
He looks much better than here with the makeup on. This guy, I'm a guy, and I tried to bring him here for this summer institute. He was actually in March in the U.S., I believe, yeah? And it was impossible to bring him here for summer, but maybe some point.
I will bring him here now.
Okay.
I'll bring him here now because he actually came to my school in March. And he came to the school in March, the same group that brought him to Classrooms Without Borders, brought him to Pittsburgh, called me up and said, hey, you want to, I know you do this book sharing project. Do you want him to come to your school? We'll make it happen. And I said, okay, of course I want him to come to my school. So I invited the other schools in my book sharing consortium. So the 2 other Ohio schools came, and he. And, oh yeah, and I'll show you that towards the end. The people from the years, I brought the kids down from the high school that came, so it was really remarkable. A whole group of people that would have no connection to Korchak, and just speaking the language. So anyway, as we move along, the second part was the postcards. These are photos of his real postcards that had left the orphanage. And on the back, they're what they were given. I had a translation of some. They were for tasks and for things that kids did, for saying prayers, for getting up early, for being clean. And then I had done some projects with postcards over the years. That will be the subject tomorrow, the actual postcards. And how you can use them, and they're great. I've used them over years. I've used them for maybe 8 and I've changed them. I've used them in literature. I've used them for all sorts of stuff. It's wonderful. But this is connected specifically to the court. Under the 6 pillars of character, respect, citizenship, responsibility, trustworthiness, caring, and fairness, if I notice, and this is still teacher or staff directed, when we notice a kid does something, this is not just, hey, the kid sharpened a pencil, or whatever. When a kid does something remarkable, I give it to the teachers, they circle it, and they would write what the kid did. They don't have to do a lot. It's very easy. And teachers will tell you, don't give me work. I don't want to give anybody work. I'll do the work myself. I will simplify it. So there's not much work. Just describe briefly what a kid did, circle it, and at the beginning of every proceeding, before the case is heard, the bailiff announces the postcard recipients for the Korchak. And this is a blown-up version of the card. And I told you the island on Bird Street. One year I had the kids, they didn't know they were doing it, but I had them draw pictures for every chapter as they were doing it and then write stuff. So I have graphic novels of this story. It's wonderful. This was one of my great artists who wrote this in the quote, the unknown person side, each child is the hope for the future, just like that x-ray. And on the back, you should have this. This is for what they've done. And the cards themselves, I do award them, or they're awarded by the kids. And I want to see if I've got an example, the actual cards. Tatiana, I think you.
No, I think they're in your luggage.
No, I think you earned a card. I think you were. You were. Yeah. If not. Oh, here we go. These are the actual cards. And we don't give a lot. I mean, for a positive reinforcement model in feedback in a middle school, I just don't give a lot. It's when somebody does something under the radar, And then I give them this letter, and the letter describes Korchak and what it means. And I've had people and adults come to me after and say, you know, oh my gosh, and this is in your materials. I gave this to you. It's a powerful letter of what Korchak did and what this card means. And what you did honors the community and makes it better, so that there's always a sense of positive and good as you hear somebody try and be good. You have a model right in front of you. And it's a wonderful, powerful thing. I mean, I had a wrestling coach come over to me and say, hey, you know, I got this card from Chris, and, you know, this was great. You know, because I had the kids give cards for something, you know, for whatever, a chosen adult. So this is what the card looks like. You are an inspired example of the 6 pillars of character. Your actions make our school and community a better place. Now, I'll show you my plans for this summer. I'm going to make a whole variety out of cards that I've got now from a whole crop of things that they did for each pillar, for each virtue: citizenship, fairness, caring, respond. I'll make one specific, you know, that the kids did. I'm not making them. The kids made them. This is where they awarded the cards in first simulation. This was a simulation because it's confidential. I can't, you know, do somebody's court. This is the cards I'll show you from a couple of years ago when they went to their partners in Israel. I brought the cards over. I was on a trip to deal with some of the schools that I work with, and this I went to one of my partner schools, and they hand delivered the cards I'll show you tomorrow. So where do we grow from here? What's that picture again? Growth plate. So there's more growth. Where do we go? As I said, 10 matchboxes. I'll bring you Amichai Pardo. He came, we brought, and it's, again, Classrooms Without Borders. He came to the school. And I'll be honest with you, not every kid in my school has been in my class. So, you know, not everybody knows Korchak. So we had, we had as many kids as we could fit because he wanted a certain number of people, plus we invited the Ohio schools. We felt it was important. They did work for the book sharing project. We wanted them to have a community outreach, and it's a wonderful play. He actually becomes Korchak. Amichai Pardo. Pardo, P-A-R-D-O, and he does a one-man show. He's been doing it for years. He's actually wonderful.
Professional actor in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, and he does another show too. I think he does Ben Gurion. Yeah, but that's for a higher level. It's a different level. But if you notice, he walks around. He pretends to be Korchak, and the kids that I've had over the years came back. It wasn't just my 8th grade and 7th grade. I had a current 7th grade, an 8th grade, and I had 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders who had been through my class and who had done book sharing. I had tons. My principal's daughter was involved with the book sharing. So there he is. He does it. And these pictures were in the local newspaper because she wanted the newspaper guy was in for something else. And he said, you have this guy, I want to take pictures of it. So this was him dressing the kids up for the court. He has them in the court session. They act out what they do. I mean, this is pretty good. These are kids. These are not my students. These are kids from an Ohio school. And it's fun having a mixture of different kids. And this is the organization that helped sponsor and underwrite Classrooms Without Borders. And my wife showed me. I'm not on Facebook because I'm a teacher, and that's just a minefield of horror. So she showed me. We gave her, because not only did she enable Pardo to come, that same night when I met her, and that same night years ago, she said, hey, we're doing this other program called The Children of Wilson Lane, which is about the kinder transport, where we give a free book to every school, 10,000 books, and it's about the kinder transport. And she said, you want to do it? I said, again, yeah, why not? Why wouldn't I? So I had my kids do that program, and they've done different cards with that program, and I really thought she was an advocate for children. So she was determined at the next proceeding, because the kids love the play so much, they awarded her a postcard, and she put that up on the site, on her site. I mean, she really was honored by it. She understood. You know, I didn't ask her to do that. I didn't, you know, again, it's like what Korchak said. Let me see if I have his actual quote. I travel with everything because to me this is all, it's all connected with everything. As I said, you know, you don't take a change in life lightly. He said, the farewell card, one of the cards was a farewell card with forget-me-not, is not a reward but a souvenir of remembrance. Some will lose it on life's road. others will treasure it forever. Guess what this woman from Classrooms Without Borders will do? She will treasure it because, you know, school, it's a deep honor to be associated with anything of Janusz Korczak. And this was the article in the paper. History takes center stage. It was a really nice article. And at the Jewish Federation of Youngstown sent a representative. They also paid for Pardo to come as well, and they presented us with this big portrait a picture of Korczak to my school. And I'll show you where we're going to hang that. That's another a visible, tangible legacy of Korczak. And it's powerful, but I marked this on purpose. After the play was over, a group of students from Sharpsville Student Court spoke briefly to the audience and presented Pardo with a postcard made by the students. Pardo said that this was a first for him. Now, this guy's been doing this all over the world for years. Two sophomores, Keely Steiner and Lauren McConaughey. Lauren was the girl who did that. Were in the 8th grade when the school first performed its student court. With about a dozen students serving as a jury and protagonist advisor, school administrators refer cases to last month the court took on about 3 cases. Steiner said, instead of determining guilt, the court helps the student determine why he or she did something, what kind of harm it may have caused, and what can be done to avoid repeating the offense. After the court has reached the decision, there's a 2-week follow-up. Quote, we have a youth advocate who works with the student and checks in with them, she said. I think this is something that everyone should see, because for him to come up with these ideas and for us to be still talking about them in 2019 is crazy. I mean, not only are they talking about it, these are kids who I asked them to come back and watch, because they're sophomores and coming down to our land is little land. So they come down, and this is something that's become part of their life. They've taken it on as a legacy of power and something important that matters.
Ira, if I can stop you
Yeah.
there, because my suggestion is we have a very short, for them to be able to talk and say how they feel, and then we have a lunch break, and then
Sure.
start. Okay? So, can we stop right there?
Can I make sure, if you give me like 60 seconds, I'll see if I get through. This is what the court looks like. Number 1, where do we go from here? And this was connected. This year, my principal gave this letter. I put this in there that she established this as our disciplinary program for the year that we just had. I can talk to you about whether or not that worked. This year we have something more realistic. She's actually letting me teach a course. So I have, in addition to my courses, all my language arts courses, I get to teach a course on youth court that the kids are mandated to show up to. I don't have to do it after school or before school. Attendance was the hardest thing for kids who just couldn't make the proceeding. So if they go there, I can train them in questioning. That's big. Number 2, this is something that the nurse just put up. The portrait is gonna hang in a room in our school that's called the Restorative Room, but they already said we employ a youth court restorative justice model of discipline, and that's where Korczak's going to be, where kids heal themselves, strengthen themselves, make themselves better, and reflect. And that's where the portrait will be. That's what's in our pipeline. And this is very problematic quote. Community goodwill. What a mighty force, from Korczak. Does anybody know where that was from? I'm sure you do know. Look at the date. He was in the ghetto. This was him noticing kids playing a game with flies for bathroom privileges, and actually treating each other with dignity, kindness, and saying, oh, if I don't have enough flies to do a number 2 there, I'll give you X number of flies. Can I just go and you catch? Yeah. And he just looked and said that basically, even in the worst times, kids still know what's right and they act on what's right.
3 weeks before the extermination.
And that is goodwill. What a mighty force. This is knowing full what would happen. And I do have, I can, if the video shows, I have a current student who was my advocate, and there was another student who was in my other course that their words, and that's it. And again, I gave you a massive packet. I would be more than happy to I would be more than happy to explain anything or help you with anything about it. It's a journey that it's worth taking. So. Thank you. And I'm sorry if I took too much time, but it's a lot of stuff.